share with you a reading from Mark's Gospel that sort of characterizes the Advent readings that are not Christmas readings. The tone of many of these readings, in the early weeks especially, is much more foreboding and serious and sometimes even a little scary. And yet they all point eventually to that great hope and great gift of Christ. From chapter 13. But in those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. And he will send out the angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. From the fig tree, learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that he is near, at the very gates. Truly, I tell you, this generation will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But about that day or hour, no one knows, neither the angels in heaven nor the Son, but only the Father. Beware, keep alert, for you do not know when the time will come. It is like a man going on a journey when he leaves home and puts his slaves in charge, each with his work, and commands the doorkeeper to be on the watch. Therefore keep awake, for you do not know when the master of the house will come, in the evening, or at midnight, or at cockcrow, or at dawn, or else he may find you asleep when he comes suddenly. And what I say to you, I say to all, keep awake. So ends the reading of God's holy word. I invite us to pray. O Holy One, for people who are used to hearing Christmas carols over the PA systems in Walmart, these words from Mark's Gospel might seem a little bit strange, perhaps out of place. And yet we see them as sacred texts coming from you. So help us to embrace what we need to embrace within this message, that our lives may be blessed and that indeed the world might be blessed as well. We ask this in your holy name. Amen. Well, for quite a while I've thought that December is a time when worlds collide, at least for those of us with a religious bent, because at precisely the moment when Black Friday and Cyber Monday have launched us into this breakneck consumer frenzy, our religious calendar is marking the beginning of Advent, a season in which, above all, we wait. How on earth do you reconcile those two forces? Kind of reminds me of the bass fishermen who crank up their 300 horsepower motors and scream down the lake at 55 miles an hour in order to grind to a halt, drop the anchor, pop a cold one, and wait hours for a fish. It's the very epitome of hurry up and wait. And there has to be one heck of a withdrawal when you've been racing down the lake like that and you have to sit drinking your liquid depressants. But I'm quite sure that each person that's sitting in the boat is on pins and needles, sweetened by the hope of the big catch. In that sense, perhaps Advent isn't so different. It's amazing how long we can wait if the catch is worth it. Our African-American brothers and sisters spent hundreds of years enduring hardship and cruelty and slavery, leaning on the hope that Christ would bring liberation. Their faith helped them to wait, and their faith helped them to risk. And that's kind of the funny thing about Advent. It's not quite like waiting for paint to dry, because there is an active component in it. Jesus insists that we're not just to remain awake, but to stay alert as well, alert to the signs of the coming of the Son of Man. At the time that these words were in Mark were first heard, times were tough. The early band of Christians, the Jews and the Gentiles, who embraced the way of Christ were finding it very rough going, with ostracism, persecution, and sometimes outright murder. They needed hope. Hope in a better day, that their wait was worth it. It just seems to me that these days the art of waiting is somewhat endangered. LL Bean will FedEx my shirt to me in 2 days if I ask him to do it, and pay for it. Usually I don't, but the option is tantalizing. Get it now. Get it fast. Even our food is increasingly fast. Even fast food's getting faster. I went to a McDonald's down near the Delaware shore when I was on vacation. You walk into the restaurant, just inside the door, there's a big kiosk, computer kiosk, with a screen where you enter your order without ever talking to anybody. Don't talk to a soul until you actually pay for your meal. And someday even that will be dispensed with, probably. Of course, the danger is if we get our fast food any faster, people are going to get burned by the fries coming right out of the frying thing. So we don't worry about that. Only the attorneys from McDonald's worry about it. Pumping gas probably isn't a whole lot faster. You can only push the liquid through so fast. But at least today you can watch TV while you wait. In case you get bored of the pump and there's a risk of drifting off to sleep. Heaven forbid. But our waiting time is filled with entertainment, or at least distraction. So good old-fashioned waiting seems to be going extinct. And of course, I've mentioned this before from this pulpit, but the folks who make their living as professional waiters and waitresses do anything but wait. In fact, I think they ought to be renamed rushers. And that's just the way we want it. And I have to confess, I like to get things fast. I enjoy my coffee in the morning right away. I want it quick. However, I haven't quite gotten to the point of driving up to Ontario County Park at 2,200 feet elevation in order to boil the water quicker to get my coffee faster. Somehow driving the 5 miles up a steep road to get my coffee 30 seconds earlier doesn't really make sense. But like anyone else, I sometimes feel a tug to get it sooner. In a lot of these instances, our quest for speed is laughable. But it's not laughable in a place like an elementary school. In a classroom where there's sometimes a frantic push to get kids in kindergarten reading earlier and earlier. In such situations like that, the rush can sometimes be almost cruel. No matter how much we try to drive the curriculum and push it faster, there is a developmental clock built right into our bodies based on the amount of fatty tissues deposited on our nerve fibers. And that nerve fiber doesn't care a lick about legislation from Albany. And our impatience can sometimes make a whole lot of kids feel like failures when what they really need is a lot more encouragement and some more fat on their axons. We've long lamented the vanishing open spaces in our world as more and more land is developed and fields and farms disappear. But perhaps just as important is the disappearance of open time. Unstructured, uncommitted time for people, young and old, to just be. For some of our youth, a lot of this overscheduling seems to be driven by a desire to succeed. Somebody's desire, whether theirs or someone older, to beat out the next kid. But what happens when everybody's beating out the next kid? When everyone's taking Latin in second grade? then no one's beating anyone except they're beating themselves up in a mad frenzy. In my mind, anyway, the logical extension of more and more accelerated children is that one day we'll have our universities filled with 8-year-olds. And when they graduate in 2 years, which they most assuredly will because they're so driven, then we'll have to be finding jobs for a whole lot of 10-year-olds. Fortunately, amidst all this mad dash, I think each one of us is drawn up short and repeatedly challenged to wait. Sometimes it may be waiting for a manure spreader ahead of you on a road with about 8 miles of double yellow lines. Sometimes it's waiting as you enter a grocery store for a person ahead of you with a walker to make their way in. It slows you down, slows me down. Sometimes it's something as basic and beautiful as waiting for a friend to finish a thought before we rush in with what we wanted to say. What I found, sometimes in spite of myself, is that things happen when I'm waiting. Good and graced things. Maybe you've had the experience of wanting to respond to something somewhat vexing that someone just said with your own knee-jerk retort. I'm sure you've never had this experience. And very nearly letting it fly from your lips, only to be stopped in your tracks when you realize that you really misunderstood what the person was saying, and if you had launched that retort, it could have been a disaster. How many times have you and I sat at the kitchen table resisting the urge to jump up and do the dishes or whatever the next task is at hand, only to have a bluebird show up? Could have missed it. Read an article recently in a waiting room. It was about Jane Goodall, the anthropologist who became famous for her studies of chimpanzees. And she would wait hours and hours to encounter a chimpanzee or a family entering their world with utmost patience, waiting to be taught. And her photographer, the article said, would sometimes even push her to a limit, insisting that they wait just another hour for the perfect shot, even when Jane was ready to go. No mistake, it can be hard to wait without distraction or entertainment or sleeping. I don't think I've yet seen a waiting room that had none of these things. No magazines, no TV, no coffee maker, no Wi-Fi. The Ontario County Jail might come close, but I'm not even sure the jail is devoid of all of those things. We want creature comforts when we wait. I think even more than the creature comforts, we need hope when we wait. Whether we're waiting for healing, justice, or forgiveness, or courage, we need to trust the one for whom we wait, and to keep awake while we do it. After hearing that he'll be visited by 3 ghosts in order to save his soul, Scrooge responds that he can't think of anything more beneficial to his soul than a good night's sleep. But he wasn't so lucky. He was forced to stay awake, or at least repeatedly awaken, and to attend to what was coming. And it was worth it. Good things come to those who wait. I want to end with a quote from Bob Hope, which was an interesting coincidence that his last name is this Sunday's theme. He had this to say about waiting. I grew up with 6 brothers. That's how I learned to dance. Waiting for the bathroom. This Advent, may we all be blessed as we wait. And maybe even dance. Amen.